Coming up to the summer holidays, most kids are starting to wind down. But for parents with kids who have got special and additional needs or hidden disabilities, the prospect of the summer holidays and the kids going back to school is actually quite scary because they don't know what they're going to face. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the details that people might overlook with regarding preparing kids going back to school and the challenges that children might actually face. And these are the small details. Details I'm going to cover are the actual physical space, the uniform, and actually the seating position. And also just get you to consider the toilets. As bizarre as it may sound, but it's very, very important. Hi, my name's David. I'm 53. I struggled at school. My mum was a special needs teacher. I didn't go to university until I was 27. The first essay I wrote was 1,000 words, 600 spelling mistakes. I became a teacher, became a special needs teacher. Back in 2012, our daughter, who was 2.5 at the time, got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And also, I'm a senior lecturer of special needs, and I teach on an international master's program. I've supported over 270 people on their masters, and my wife and I have rewritten the inclusive education policy for Nigeria. So I very much lived and live the special needs, hidden disability world. And it's the devil that the devil's in the detail. And preparing kids and children to go to school is so important. What I'm now doing is going to cover some the areas roughly in 5-minute blocks to talk to you about the little details that can make going to school hell or heaven for kids, or a mixture of both. So what I'm going to do is, if this works, which it does not, which is a pain. Hi, sorry. It's coming up to the summer holidays for most kids around the world. Some kids more might even be on holiday, but for the children that are going on holiday, they might start. It's coming up to the summer holidays for kids in the Northern Hemisphere. They might even be on summer holiday, but actually, the parents of children with hidden invisibility, for kids with hidden invisible disabilities and undiagnosed disabilities, are starting to think about their kids going back to school already. There might be fear and trepidation. And also from the teacher's perspective, they're already starting to think about the children that they're going to face. In this video, I'm going to cover 3 areas about the potential issues that children might face when they go back to school and things that need to be taken into consideration. And then the small ones that might not necessarily be written in the plans, that the teachers might not take into consideration, the challenges that this causes for the children, the parents, and ultimately the teachers as well, because they're going to have to manage and support the children's behaviours, and it might be misinterpreted. So who am I and what am I? Well, first and foremost, I'm David. I struggled at school. My mum was a special needs teacher. So, I didn't go to university till I was 27. First essay that I wrote for university was, I don't know, it must have been what, 1,000 words, 600 spelling mistakes. I became a special needs teacher. In 2012, my daughter got diagnosed with a brain tumor. She's got a range of issues, and I subsequently became a university lecturer, and I've supported over 270 people in their master's dissertations on special needs. And my wife and I rewrote the inclusive education policy for Nigeria. So we very much live and breathe this stuff 24/7. What we're going to do is I'm going to take you through a series of photos and do some analysis with you and get you to reflect on the little things that might not be thought of, you might not consider, but you might want to change both as professionals and as parents in order to support the children and try to be as successful as possible within the school environment, and to enable discussions to start happening early so situations don't get out of control. So let's have a look. First of all, I'm going to look at the uniform. Now, people don't often consider the uniform, but we all wear clothes, and more often than not, we choose the clothes that we're wearing. We choose them for comfort. We choose them for style. If the children are going to a school which has uniform, they don't have a choice. They've got to manage with what they've got. But the uniform can present problems. So if we take a close look at these kids, let's look at the buttons. I told you it's in the detail. This uniform has got buttons. What does that mean for kids? It means that they've got to potentially dress themselves and change as well, which means they've got to have the fine motor skills. They've got to have the skills to unbutton themselves. And some children simply don't have that skill, and some people don't have that skill to do it because it's just too, quite frankly, fiddly, which then can take time. And as a result of that, the children can get told off for taking their time through no fault of their own because they've got issues managing the clothing. So my question to you is, if the children have issues with the clothing, is it possible, maybe, and if there are buttons there, to make the slits ever so slightly bigger and put slightly bigger buttons on so the children don't struggle, don't get distressed when they have to undo the buttons and do the buttons back up? Because I remember very clearly children being laughed at, and certainly I got laughed at for taking my time unbuttoning my shirt at school. That causes embarrassment, that causes distress, that causes problems for the teachers. So maybe, I say, just opening up that slit ever so slightly more where the buttons are, putting a slightly bigger button on so it's not so tough, the children can have an easier time. Also, I want you to look at the collars. As you can see, I'm in a t-shirt. Quite frankly, I can't stand wearing shirts. Don't like it, it irritates me. If I have to, I'll tolerate it, but I will have it loose, just like these children. So if you look at this child, his collar is more up, but this child has chosen to have the collar slightly lower, which means it might not be irritating him as much. Also, I want you to look at the sleeves. They're short sleeves. I always wear short sleeves, even if I'm wearing shirts, I'll always roll it up. If the children have got to wear uniform, the children might have issues with the sensory issues and find it uncomfortable. They might fiddle with the uniform. And as a result of that, the children, again, could get told off for fiddling with the uniform, playing around, messing around. The thing is, the children might simply be uncomfortable. Now, I'm going to move to this uniform. If you then look at these pupils, and it comes down to, again, the buttons, these children, they actually, for them to get both the girls and the boys, for them to get their tops off, actually they don't have to do as many buttons. They can wear their tops looser, which means that it's a lot easier for them to change. I also want you to be aware and look at how loose the clothing is. If you look, the t-shirts, the kids look absolutely, I mean, they look really, really smart. They look lovely. They're well dressed and they're clean. But the uniform is loose, which means, again, if people don't like that tight uniform, they feel uncomfortable. Actually, you've got that greater movement. It's better on the sensory issues. It's easier. So it could be that actually, if the kids, and these kids, again, they got their uniform, the little boy on the left-hand side, or the kid on the left-hand side, his shirt's tucked out, but one of the children has got his shirt tucked in. They might be more flexible with the uniform. The beauty is that actually the children have a choice over their own sensory needs. They have greater control. It might mean that the school and the parents discuss together the sensory issues of the children to enable the children to be as comfortable as possible. Now, another little thing, and again, it may sound really, really minor, but look at the school shoes. This girl has got slip-on shoes, while this girl, again, they've got slip-on, but it's more, they've actually got to tie it up. So there could be challenges for the children with the actual shoes themselves, and this boy has got slip-ons. It could be a requirement of the school that the children have laced up shoes, but there might be issues with the children actually having laces. So you need to find a way around it. You need to find a happy compromise to enable the children to be as independent as possible. And this includes secondary school children, to enable them to be as independent as possible and not stand out from the crowd so they get bullied, but still conform to the uniform policy. Now let's have a look at the next picture. Again, there you go. Look at this uniform. If you look at these guys, they're wearing a shirt and tie. Now, for me, that's completely and utterly uncomfortable, and it comes with a number of issues. Number one, the collars. It could make the children uncomfortable, and playing all the time, it could cause sores. Next thing is you've got the tie. Now, how many children actually do have a tie? Is there an option within the uniform policy for the children to actually have pre-tied ties so they can clip on them? So is there any way that people can work with local organizations, a seamstress, a tailor, for the children who don't have the skills to tie up the tie, to have an adapted tie that can be clipped on so the children don't stand out, they don't get bullied, but there isn't an issue with putting on the tie? And again, coming down to that comfort factor, if the uniform can be loose, it might not cause discomfort for the kids. And again, if we look here, the children have got short sleeves. I refer back to the fact that the kids might feel uncomfortable and they might not be able to express themselves on how they feel. So to parents, if you're watching this and your children feel uncomfortable in certain clothing, I suggest and strongly recommend you communicate with the school board, and whoever it was, and express if your children have got issues around sensory issues and wearing clothing. You have an in-depth discussion explaining the sensory issues, the challenges that your kids face, the behavioral issues that this comes with if they're in clothing that doesn't meet their needs, and communicate with the schools. With the schools, if your teachers, if your head teachers, if your governors, you might spot kids who are uncomfortable or exhibiting behavior that you don't consider deemed to be appropriate, but it could come from the uniform. What I strongly suggest you do is work with the parents to figure out a solution so the children could wear the uniform conform to the needs of the school, but be adapted ever so slightly, because there are so many children, and I'm looking at my notes down here, who have got sensory issues. The children might be autistic, they might be allergic to stuff, there might be fabrics that people simply don't like, but this could cause problems. And I'm just thinking from a teacher's perspective, the teachers could misread the situations where they see children misbehaving, in quotes, in the classroom, when in fact, purely and simply, the kids are uncomfortable in the clothing that they're wearing. Now, what I'm going to move on to now is actually the corridor and the environment. I want you to stop or I'm going to pause for a moment, and I want you to imagine how you would feel walking down this corridor. Now, what I want you to do is picture walking down this corridor with lots of kids, lots of people. What is the sensory environment like? Now, again, I'm looking down at notes. It's what would the acoustics be like? How would the sound change with the people? What about the smells? I mean, I'm very sensitive to smells, to be honest about it. And let's be honest about it. When you've got a lot of teenagers around, the environment could be odorous, particularly if they're not wearing deodorant. So there's a lot of smells that are there from a sensory perspective. You've also got the lighting. If you look at the lighting as well, how that might feel. Now, there's a lot of information also to absorb going down this corridor: which room, where, what time, how many steps, and there's a lot of distance as well. And when you're walking down this corridor, there's a lot of potential social interactions that people might have to abide by or have to do. Now, for kids with, again, hidden and visible disabilities, autistic, kids with who are visually impaired, kids who are deaf, kids like my daughter, to be honest about it, who are cancer survivors and suffer from fatigue, because that's a long corridor and that's a lot of information that people have to process, and also kids with processing issues. This corridor can be a nightmare for so many different children, and the children might have to navigate from one space to another, and it can be distressing and exceptionally uncomfortable. So what, again, I suggest and I recommend to parents is explain to the schools how your children engage in the environment. If they find certain environments distressing, open spaces, noisy spaces, the acoustics are too much, and make it very, very clear to the school the distress potentially and the negative behaviors that it could cause and invoke for the children. For the teachers and the staff, I need you to bear in mind that if the children are uncomfortable in this environment, you're going to get negative behaviors in the classroom. The children won't perform as well and they won't maximize their potential. So again, I can't emphasize enough that the schools, the educational professionals and the parents need to work together to explore the environment and understand how the children engage in that environment, so it's not distressing. It could mean that the children leave the classroom slightly earlier to get from one place to another, or slightly later. Now, bear in mind that a lot of children have hidden disabilities. So what you're looking for really is behavioral patterns on children and how children are performing and how they're coming from one classroom to another, from one lesson to another, as they're moving around the environment, because this could be very, very distressing. Now I'm going to move on to, let's have a look. Yeah, okay. I'm going to cover two more things. One, I need you to look at this child who's holding the pen. And I want you to pause for a moment. Imagine it's you. As an adult, how comfortable would you be holding that pen at that angle at your shoulder height? Is that comfortable? Now there's another picture I'm going to go to. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, you've got these kids. Again, I want you to look at these kids. Again, they're holding pens. Look at where their pen is, how they're holding the pen compared to the height of the table. Is this comfortable? For the majority of us, I'd say that we as adults are privileged where we can move the environment, where we can change the environment, we can raise the seat up and down, we can move around. But you've got the kids here who are having to write, and to be honest about it, this doesn't look comfortable to me. Certainly, if I'm holding my shoulder up at that angle and having to write, I guarantee I'm not going to perform as well. And if I look here, where is it? If we look at this child, he's really having to concentrate. It could be uncomfortable, and then unfortunately the child might not perform as well. It could be a lot harder for him to write. It could be issues with his fine motor skills in terms of holding that pen overall. It could cause strain, and to be honest about it, his behavior might change as well. Same with the other children. Again, what's a simple solution? What I need you to do as parents is look at how your children hold the pen. What's the most comfortable seating position for them so they can perform when they're using the pen, and explain to the school the best position for the kids. Now, there's no way in the world, I can't imagine a school going out and purchasing new chairs for the kids, but they might be able to provide a cushion for the kids, elevate the position slightly better, so that actually it's not causing discomfort for the kids. Because at the bottom line is, what you want to do is you want the kids to perform as well as possible and not feel distressed. I'm now going to go to this, which, to be honest about it, is the classroom for this environment. To me, would be a nightmare. Have I got ADHD? Who knows? Do I lack concentration? Yep. Do I wander off at times? Yep. If I was sitting in that class right now, I would not be able to concentrate on that board because I would have to filter out all of the information. Because to be fair, I would be more interested in the what's that thing called? In the map that's over here. And actually, I would drift off and look at the map and go, oh, I wonder what it's like in that country. I wonder what the kids are doing now. What you've got is that there are, again, I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but you've got kids who've got information overload. And while I understand that there are school regulations and organizations or governing bodies that say schools need to have lots of posters up, but you've got children who've got ADHD, you've got kids you've got the acoustic environment, who have got sensory overload. And that environment, to me, that classroom, is sensory overload. So one way to address this, and following the regulations, and also not overburdening the teachers at all, would simply be, if possible, to cover up the posters, not take them down, simply cover them up at times if you're finding certain children are getting distracted. So think about how much information children of the person's actually getting are in the environment, because it could also be information overload. I'm going to now finish on this. And it comes down to the handwriting on the board, to be honest about it. I'm literate. I can write. My handwriting's terrible, to be honest about it. But actually, from the position that I'm in, I'm struggling. I'm really, really struggling actually to read what's on the board. And if you look at this, you've got, if Simon in your family has cancer, definition, feelings, treatment. Okay, now I actually had to move closer into this, to a shot, to actually read this. How many children, and I speak to the professionals now, how many children who are not identified as having dyslexia, reading difficulties in literacy? They might, not only are they struggling to read, but actually the way that the teacher has actually written the information on the board would make it even harder. It looks lovely and flowing handwriting, but it's difficult to decode, it's difficult to process. The teacher's still got to have that information. One way to address this would be to write in a more block-like fashion, Arial, Times New Roman, you know, like that blocky type of fashion, so that the children can also read. To parents, what I suggest you do is communicate to the school if your children are struggling to read the teacher's handwriting. It's not a slight, it's not negative, it's not being horrible to the teachers, it's not being horrible to the school. At the end of the day, the children are there to receive information and to express the information. And if they can't acquire that information, they're going to get frustrated. Again, I say this to the teachers, you're going to get negative behaviors or ones that you don't want. The children might drift off, they might get bored, they might play around, purely and simply because of the handwriting that's being used. Finally, and I will finish up on this with regards to handwriting, it's or the board is actually, it's the color contrast. I'm again struggling to actually read it because the chalk that was used, it seems it's not as, the contrast isn't there. I'm not sure, to me it looks like they've used green chalk rather than white chalk. So it looks to me like a blackboard. The contrast should be a lot stronger. That's yet another barrier to reading. So I'm going to finish, again, like I said, I'm going to finish off. Really, the aim behind this video was to get people to think about the challenges of going to school and going back to school, and the challenges of the uniform, the challenges of the environment literally moving from one place to another, and how that impacts the senses, the processing, and also what the classroom environment is actually like for the children to process that written information that's on the board. And if the environment isn't appropriate, and it's very hard to change the environment, it's vitally important that both the educational professionals, the teachers, and the parents communicate and express the challenges that are facing and figure out simple solutions that are effective to enable the children to engage. Changing your handwriting, allowing more time. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to do further videos on going back to school and challenges and issues that would face. If you like this, please like, comment, and share. And if you want me to cover certain other topics, do let me know. Thank you very, very much for your time.